Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the Mike Lead Aspire session tonight. Um, I am Mary Janey, if you didn't know. Hopefully, you do. We're on the mic with tonight. Uh, and let's see if I get it right. Omowunmi. I try to do it right now. I practice it right. We're on, and I don't know. Again, you're gonna still have to help me practice with the last name, but we're on the mic tonight with Omi, and we're just gonna just have a little conversation. Like you said, it's our little fireside chat. So I will first let Omi introduce herself, and then we can have this little chat.
All right, great. Thanks for having me, Mary. Excited to do this. And my name is Omowunmi Akinyoade in full. But for those that find it challenging, you can call me Omi. That is perfectly fine. And my current role is I'm a senior director for cybersecurity compliance at Pegasystems. So I lead teams responsible for vendor risk management and compliance certifications. We do things like ISO and PCI. And I'm also helping Mary out and volunteering as the membership director for MiC. So that has been interesting. I'm a recent graduate of the MiC Lead Communicators program. Also, I'm married and I have two kids who are grown or getting grown. Younger one just turned, well, is 16 and driving himself. So I have more free time on my hands. Very kind of that. Uh,
Yes, I can. Go ahead.
yeah, so that's kind of, me in a nutshell, and looking forward to the fireside chats.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yes, I can relate. I can relate. It is something to get to the point where they are spending for themselves, and you're more
Yeah.
so in that. But you're more. It's still mentorship and guidance type of
Well,
thing. My daughter, she just turned 17 on June the 14th. She had received her license on June the 10th. So she's been gaining that independence. And for some reason or other, it's with my daughter, it's more stressful than it was with my son. But I'm getting there. So poor Miss Mary. But I am getting some free time in. I'm excited about this art gallery opening that I'm going to tomorrow. So it's awesome. So but it's not about me and my transition. It's about you. So, senior director compliance, cybersecurity compliance for Pega. Tell us, your origin story. How did you get to this profession?
All right, so let's go back 20, 20 plus years ago, at the beginning. So I graduated with a bachelor's degree in computer engineering from Obafemi Awolowo University in Nigeria. And at the time, I really was not aware of cybersecurity or information security as it was then called. It wasn't something that was really top of mind. And I really could not have planned out my career, the way it evolved. It was more of a taking, steps that were available to me, like, okay, what are the options now? And then taking, that one step. And along the way, it's evolved and I got here. But let me go back to the beginning. So I graduated, and one thing about the Nigerian market is that jobs are very, very competitive. Like unemployment is very, very high. But I did have expectations of working in certain fields and making good money. So I was interested in consulting. And after I had graduated, I was waiting, I was applying and waiting for that to happen. But my very first job was doing help desk at an internet service provider. And that happened because this was way back during the dial-up days, at least in Nigeria was, dial-up early 2000s. And I had taken, some computers. My dad was having a problem with some of his computers that weren't connecting. And then it was like, the desktop with the modem, and you have to go and shoot and figure out, is the modem the problem, or is it the ports, the switches of the motherboard, all that stuff. And they were very busy that day. And I just got in there and started helping, like, give me a screwdriver, you need to take apart these computers, you need to pull this out, give me a spare motherboard. And at the end of that, I was like, oh, you know what? Maybe I could work here while I'm waiting for the consulting thing, to happen. And I basically, walked in and said, hey, you know what? You have an opening. Do you need extra hands? And they hired me. So I started, to work there, and I worked there for 2 months before the job I was applying to at Accenture came through. But it was, even though it was a short period, there's still like very valuable lessons I learned, during that period. Customer service, you're dealing with a lot of people, and learning how to treat people with respect, learning that and understanding that the fact that they don't know about computers, or that they come with a problem and it's like, oh, that's so silly. Did you even plug it in? But, understanding that, gosh, they have their respective professions and areas where they're experts. And it was my job, to help them where they had, the gap. So I really got to see how people appreciated, that respect. But anyway, I went on to work for Accenture, and, really getting to live my dream at the time, which was helping businesses use IT, to solve problems. So I got to do a lot of projects in like business IT strategy development, and I also got to do web development because at the time a lot of banks were just building like e-commerce sites and stuff like that. So it was very interesting. Also, a big lesson from that period was being a quick learner, because each project, you're supposed to start the project, you're supposed to be the expert. You go to the client site and you're suddenly the expert on this thing you've never done before. So spending as much time as I could, researching the subjects, learning everything I could about different, projects that the company had already done in that area. How did they do this? Making sure I get up to speed. And also understanding that even though, I was a junior analyst, there was really no limit, like, oh, you're a junior analyst and this is all you get to do. And maybe because the Nigerian office, it was a small office, so you could really do as much as you were capable of, right? So managing, the project to the extent that, hey, if you don't need to call in the partner, if you don't need to call in the manager, so really learning to step up to the plate and taking initiative, that was my valuable experience that I took away from that. I worked there for a couple of years, and then I wanted to come to the US because, yeah, almost everybody wants to come to the US, or, go to some foreign country. And I wanted to, come for my master's. So Carnegie Mellon was the school that I kind of zeroed in on. I had a colleague who had come from US, and I said, which place is best for information technology? So I had been looking at other schools, and I started looking at Carnegie Mellon. But I saw that, okay, yeah, they do have this master's in IT, but the application deadline, I had just missed it because my interest was what was really trending then was the software engineering, concentration. But they had this other thing called information security and assurance that had a rolling admission. I think they were trying to get people in for that. And I was desperate to go. So I looked at the curriculum and I was like, okay, I really want to do software engineering. The curriculum seems very, very much like the software engineering curriculum with a few differences. But I thought, okay, you know what? I can make up the difference, by taking electives and stuff. So I applied for that, and I ended up at Carnegie Mellon. After I came in, though, I then started thinking as I The job market was bad at the time, early 2000s. A lot of IT companies were going belly under, and a lot of the big companies, were not filing for foreign students. So I started thinking, gosh, you know what, maybe I made a mistake with this information security thing. But still going forward and still, trying to put my best foot forward, like, okay, I did something silly then. I took the information security off my resume because, yeah, because I had come to the conclusion that, oh, gee, all the jobs I'm seeing, they're like government agencies, trying to hire people to do like policy and GLC stuff, which I was interested in, but was like, they're not going to hire me. So I took it off my resume, continued just looking for jobs in IT in general. And I was at this networking event. There were IT companies and there were nonprofit companies because the program I had been in Carnegie Mellon was under the Heinz School, which is the School of Policy. So they had, like public policy students and then the IT students at this networking event together. And the recruiters had colored badges. I can't remember, it was blue and green. I can't remember which was for which. So let's say blue was for IT and green was for public policy. I was just laser focused on, the blue, like only talk to the blue people. And there was this green lady who kept talking to me and said, hey, so what do you do? But, out of politeness, I right, I recited my elevator spiel and was like, okay, let me quickly get away and catch those blue people and give them my spiel as well. And she was like, oh, that's exactly what we need. And I was like, huh, okay, really? So we talked a bit. And what shocked me though, she worked at this organization called Housing Opportunities Inc. And she was telling me how they were taking, they were managing housing grants across the US for the for HUD, the Housing and Urban, Developments. And they were taking all these reports by paper, by fax. And I was like, that is impossible. That cannot be happening in the United States of America. Everything must already be digitized. I was like, I can fix that for you. You should not be taking in paper faxes and then transcribing them and adding them up with what? Oh no, oh no. So I started working for them, before I graduated and started building an application to take in the grant reports from the agencies around the country online and produce all these reports. So I was doing that as I'll do this for now until I get the job I want, still looking for the consulting gig and all that. I ended up working for this organization for 4 years. And during that 4 years, I learned a lot. I was, for all intents and purposes, the IT department at this organization. I was in charge of the Exchange server, of the firewall, if they need any networking thing, looking at all the technology they were using, like, oh gosh, you're using this application for managing, relationship, the CRM solution. I was like, but you're not using the full capabilities of it. So I learned about it. I went to user groups. It was an application called ACT. Learned all I could about it, developed training, for the staff. I did that. And along the way was like, oh, you know what? There's this better application out there, and they're actually offering discounts for nonprofits and I can set you up on this. So I did the migration of the contact database. So I did a lot of stuff during that period. And but I got to the point I was like, okay, I think I've maxed out, what I can do with this, with the organization at this level. I want something bigger. I need to advance my career. And I did spend time, making sure I migrated them off. Oh gosh, this Exchange server, moved to a managed service. managing your own firewall, moved to a managed service. So even though I wasn't in information security then per se, but it was in my head, like, gosh, we need to be more secure, we need to be more efficient. You can't be doing these things on your own. It's not effective. So I started, trying to figure out what do I want to do. By this time, I wasn't so interested in consulting anymore because I had a little kid. And I started thinking, okay, gee, the travel, I don't think I want the travel, but what else can I do that will be like consulting? Because I found it very exciting. And someone told me about IT audit. I was like, oh, yeah, I've heard about CISA, IT audits. I was like, not really. So I looked at some job descriptions and I was like, it's IT internal auditor. And some of the job descriptions I saw, I was like, okay, it's kind of like being that internal consultant person, but I'll be working, within this one organization. So I remember it was a January 1, I made the decision, okay, I'm going to take my CISA. So I registered on ISACA's website. I ordered the books, I ordered the training material, and started studying. And I also started applying for jobs. At that time, the CISA exam used to take place once in 2 years. It was like a June and December. So I made this decision in January, but I had to wait till June before I could take the exam. So I was like, let me just see what, like how the job market is. Let me send out some resumes, put the CISA register. I hadn't taken it, was like register for exam, but there was the CISA already on my resume. So I guess that got me through some of the online screening. But I got a job, started a job in April as an IT auditor. Right. And again,
I'm just saying, wow. I mean, I have so many other questions, but keep going, keep going, keep going. I'm sorry.
but again, it was, I joined Progressive. I started at an entry level IT auditor, and they had a 6-month training plan. You get onboarded. I was assigned a mentor. I would learn the ropes of IT auditing and all that. So my first 2 weeks, I remember I was following my mentor to all her meetings. I was listening to everything, and I was like 2 weeks, and I was like, I don't like this 6-month training plan isn't going to work for me. Give me my project now. Like I'm ready for one. And my mentor too went and was like, yeah, I think she's ready. Told the manager, I think, she's ready for a project. So I got assigned a project. Later, I learned that it was a project that other people had attempted, and it was kind of like this at the bottom of the file drawer project. But I didn't know that. I, pursued this. It was more like a research investigation, some technology that was embedded, in our systems, and we needed to kind of do some kind of risk assessment around what's the status of it, what's going on with it. And I had to interview so many people like, oh, somebody worked on this 10 years ago, and somebody will give me names and give me names. But I got to meet so many people across the organization, and I got to find people who are doing different things around this technology and connect them together. And it kind of became my thing. I became the expert on this piece. But to jump ahead, fast forward ahead, I got promoted very, very quickly. Again, that taking initiative. I started in April. I did my CISA, a couple of months after that. Passed the CISA. I remember, the day I went to tell my manager that, hey, by the way, I registered for the CISA exam and I passed it. And it was like, oh, that's great. Did we pay for that? I said, no. I said, okay, you know what? Go expense everything you spent on it. And then it was like, you know what else would be great? If you took the CISSP. I was like, okay. So again, got the material for that. Like, okay, that's my next target. My manager said I should do the CISSP, so I'm doing the CISSP. I didn't do it immediately because again, I was second child was on the way. Funny thing, I was going off on maternity leave at that time. I was pregnant when I started the job. And my plan was, so I had all my study material. I was like, oh, this is what I'm going to do while I'm on maternity leave. But yeah, reality, right, was that it was the day before I returned to work that I looked up on my shelf and was like, oh, I was supposed to be studying for the CISSP. Completely forgot about it. But once I returned to work anyway, found other people who were interested in the exam as well. We formed a study group. We formed a study plan. We studied together and studied alone as well. Studied with my kids, I remember, and ended up, getting the CISSP. So progressive, my time there, it was great. I was promoted very quickly, as I said. But then I also got impatient. I was like, gee, now I've moved from level 1, 2, 3. And I see many people who are waiting many years before they become manager, and I want to be manager like right now. So I started looking outside and I got another job to start an IT audit function. It was at a university. And I was looking for challenge, right? I was looking for I need a new challenge. I was doing very well where I was. But oh yeah, it's getting to the difficult part because the challenge was different than what I expected. It was no longer a technical challenge like, okay, now you need to learn how to audit this new thing. It was more of a people challenge of maybe some people don't even want you here, right?
Yeah, that part. Yeah.
So it was a slow process, trying to get buy-in for new project. Okay, why do we need to do this audit? Getting people to talk to me. Things were very, very slow. So this was a university, right? And one of the benefits that universities offer, I don't know if every university does that, but they did, is that you can go to school for free. So I thought, okay, you know what? I already have a master's. Maybe I should get a PhD. So I enrolled in the PhD program. I thought, while I'm waiting, while I'm pushing things through, I'm going to be doing my PhD on the side. So I started doing a PhD in knowledge management. And that was very interesting because it was kind of a different study from everything I had done in my background. High school, I did mostly all science subjects, college, computer engineering, master's information technology. But this time I got to, learn about philosophy and kind of human behavior, culture, and a lot of it I found was very, very relevant, especially, after seeing that, being in that environment and seeing how challenging some things can be. So you can have all the technology in the world, but if you don't have the buy from people, if you don't understand how people, take in knowledge, how to get buy-in, like the philosophy of learning, all those things, it was very interesting just getting exposed to that worldview. Uh, so I was there, and I got, should I say, someone I was reached out to for another role, which I took. And went into now a cybersecurity role, function. Working as an information security officer at a bank. And that was another very different experience, very stressful, exposed to more of like should I say, more like the high stakes fear challenge of, gee, all hands on deck, this thing is happening, we need to do this. So it was interesting, but culturally, it was not the best fit for me. So I ended up leaving that and going into a compliance role on the cybersecurity for a software company. So that was before my current company, where I was responsible for doing SOC 2 audits, managing the SOC 2 audits for software products, dealing with clients, dealing with legal. It was dealing, with our sales team. That was interesting. And while I was there, so I was an individual contributor while I was there. And my manager at some point, was leaving the organization. And he proposed that it made sense, for me to be the manager after he left. So he sent this proposal off, to his boss, who was the CISO. And after my manager left, I sat around and waited, like, hey, okay, I guess, someone's going to contact me and tell me how this thing's going to happen, how I become a manager. Do I need to put in an application? What have you? But nobody contacted me. So I reached out, to the CISO and said, hey, I'd like to meet with you. So we met. And at the meeting, I was like, hey, I've been waiting for this thing to happen and nobody has contacted me. So I'd like to know what the plan is. I found out that there was no plan, and maybe he never received maybe he never read the communication or whatever. Maybe I needed to have prepared him more for it. So that was a little bit of a disappointment. But, I kind of shook that off and I was like, well, the main thing is that I, again, continue doing the work. People value the work I'm doing. My team value the work I'm doing. And we stay the course. We continue delivering on what we're delivering on. And other opportunities will come, right? So that was that. And a couple of time went by. Time went by, and my boss, now in a different company, reached out to me and was like, hey, opportunity over here, would like you to come over. So I went over also as an individual contributor. And shortly after, we had the same scenario happen. He was leaving and proposed that, hey, again, Omi, you are the best candidate
Successor. Mm-hmm.
to step into this role. So again, I was like, okay, well, let's see. This time my hopes weren't all that high. But this time around, it did happen. The new boss I was under, very, very supportive. And he also, he was like, yeah, this is going to happen. And he pushed for it. Some of my team members even, sent some recommendations because I was like, I've experienced this before, where I got to this point and
Mm-hmm.
it didn't happen. And I shared that, with some of my team members, and they were like, oh, yeah, we've got to make sure this happens. And some of them sent it.
Yeah.
And well, it happened, and here I am now. So along the way, I had that. So I had the compliance team, and we needed to build up, a team to do vendor risk as well. So I got to hire and develop this global team, and that's my long story.
No, it's amazing. And I mean, it took everything. That's why I stayed on mute because I didn't want to interrupt you. As you went through your background, your origin story, but it becomes readily apparent to me that ambition was in you at a very, very, very young age. And you wanted more out of yourself, right? You went from went from help desk and putting together computers to IT audit to IT, then to IT audit, then what do I wrote down here? I wrote it, and I can't read my handwriting. That's bad. Um, I mean, it just seems like you had a goal for yourself and you just wanted to continue to get better. And
Yeah.
as younger professionals on the call and the aspirers and looking to, and as they hear your story, you never like sat on your laurels. You just wanted more for yourself. And you're like, okay, did you get your PhD?
No, I did not. I dropped out from that.
Okay.
Because I did it because it was an opportunity in that moment, right? While I
Mhm,
had
mhm,
time on my hands. And after I moved on, it became very, very stressful. And I had
mhm,
to talk to myself at some point and say, hey, you know what? It's okay to let some things go. Because and being Nigerian, all the things, we love education. So my
mhm,
family back, because I had visited Nigeria around that time, and they had learned that I was doing a PhD. So I remember when I went to Nigeria, and I was like, no, I've dropped out. They were like, oh no, we don't do that. They're like, you're just taking a break. I was like, okay, think what you want. So, but
Okay.
I really
Okay.
had to
Thank
just
you.
go like, sometimes it's okay. It's okay to step back from some things. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, and it sounds like even throughout your career that once you started getting to a certain level, which is why the communicators program itself was developed, is like you were experiencing challenges, but they were not about your subject matter expertise. It was about culture, it was about people, it was about and that's what trips us up um with in our careers, because
Right.
we're like, okay, well, I've been doing all of this. Like it would have been easy for you to give up after you were promised, you were the next in line at the first organization, and then they didn't even promote you, right? I took a lot of courage to go to the CISO and say, what the heck is going on? And I've done that in my career as well. It's like, would you just tell me what's going on? So if you don't waste my time, and don't keep me sitting here if you know you're not going to promote me. So I really so and you and I talk, and I know the backstory to a lot of these stories in regards to the challenges, and I respect the fact that you're not going to share that, and that's fine. But when we're talking to the aspirers group, which are those that are trying to get into the space, what what piece of advice would you give them as they try to start their career, just starting out?
Right, right. So for those just starting out, and I know there are many people who already have some experience, they have some experience in a certain field. So I would say never discount that experience they already have. Because, I talk to a few people and, they think, oh, this is so hard to break into. How do I get into this? Like, first of all, recognize that you have a lot of transferable skills. For example, the help desk experience I have, I still find it valuable, the lessons I learned there. And when I have, dealing with my team, or if I'm trying to hire somebody, it's not just about the technical experience. You want somebody who is able to deal with people, who kind of has that balance and can have a nuanced conversation, and that's customer service, ethic, like how can I help you, how can I make things better, right? And so that is one
Yeah,
piece of
absolutely.
advice. And the other thing I would say is also look at, sometimes you might be trying to get to a certain role or a certain position, but maybe there's something in the interim. Like, so you don't always have to wait for, like, oh, here's the perfect thing, I'm imagining. It's more about, what are the opportunities that are actually available to me now? And let me, take those, take advantage of those. And you never know what it might translate into. Because I said, it wasn't like I could look down, to look down the future and predict that, hey, these are the paths I'm going to take. In fact, what I was imagining, was different from what actually happened. And in a lot of cases, like what actually happened is better than what I imagined, right? So,
Yeah, absolutely. We have somebody raise their hand. Let's see. Emmy, you want to come in and ask your question? If you have a question, you can also put it in the chat or in the Q&A. If you're out there on YouTube, I'm monitoring both things here. So, Emmy, you want to come off mute and ask your question?
I'll put it in the chat.
Or yeah, put it in the chat if you can, because we can't hear you. You're on the mute. Okay. I think you might want to put it in the chat. We're having some technical difficulties there. So put it in the chat or put it in the Q&A and we'll get to it. And so as we continue to have this particular conversation, of course, as a minority leader and as someone, as an immigrant, right? You came over to this country, you know, what particular challenges have you had when you made the transition to people leader, and how do you really relate to the individuals that are under your purview? What would you think is your biggest challenge as a minority leader?
Well, I wouldn't say it's hard to say, okay, what's a challenge as a minority leader versus what's just a challenge, for me. And I would say, the biggest challenge that I had when I made the transition from individual contributor to a people leader was really learning to let go of certain things, because now I have to be more about enabling my team, so that they can do the work. I remember my first year actually felt like, what have I accomplished, because
Right.
right, like now I'm no longer doing the audits directly, because there's like this satisfaction, that comes from I did this project and I did this review and I analyzed this piece of data and I collected this, and you feel good from that. But now, it was more like I'm relying on somebody else to do that. And during my first year, because I was still kind of transitioning, because I transitioned into a people leader in the same role, right? So there were things
Yeah.
that I was still doing that I was trying to hand off. So it took me a while before I learned, to create that time and space for making sure I'm doing like the people leader stuff versus being bogged down in, other projects or stuff that needed to get done.
Right. Right. Yeah. And that's the biggest challenge of
Right.
anyone making a transition, and understanding that
But
it's about the team and being a leader, right?
Right, right. But in terms of maybe being a minority, and what might be a challenge, I put it down to it's kind of the challenge of mastering the self and learning, that because when things happen, like in the case where I wanted something and I did not get it, I cannot just sit back and say, oh, it's because I'm a minority. I don't know that for a fact, really, right? So I try not to, get steeped in that headspace. So that is the challenge, that I constantly work on. Like, yeah, if I don't get something, it's not my responsibility to go figure out if the person who might have made it happen did what they did or didn't do what they did because I'm a minority, or because they're just so busy, or because it's not, or because they had other, priorities, or maybe they were saying something else that I wasn't seeing, or maybe they genuinely felt I wasn't ready. It's not my responsibility. So all I can really
Mhm.
control is myself, and
Mhm.
and that's a journey. That's an ongoing journey of
Yeah.
self-mastery.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. With younger professionals, and you and I are on the X side of the house as far as generations go. So we have a different mental state at times than some of the younger professionals, as it relates to that resiliency that you have to build up and through, in dealing with disappointment and dealing when you don't get the particular role that you want. And I of course, you guys know I have the apprenticeship program. I talk to individuals all the time that apply for hundreds of roles and are really, really n- not getting
Yeah.
anything. And I don't get bogged down into whether or not the postings are real or anything like that. It's taking control of what you can, and like you've done in your career, it's picking up. You guys don't hear me say it again. It's picking up a book. It's becoming a student. It's doing something that's going to progress you forward, not just sitting back, laying back of where you are. And like you said, you pursued your PhD as a distraction from what you were dealing with in the organization. That's the one thing that no one could ever take away from you is your education. And I guess my bloodline falls through Nigeria as well, so I guess that's what we're talking about as far as work ethic goes. And that emphasis on education. We do have a one in the Q&A. What are three characteristics, non-technical skills, do you look for in new hires in junior or entry level roles?
One very important one for me is someone who takes initiative. So I'll say taken, well, maybe before that is learning, and they're related. So, being a learner, just having that learning mindset, taking initiative, that is, say you're assigned, some work, you do it, and it's like, okay, I'm done, and then you're just sitting, doing nothing, waiting to be assigned the next thing. So taking initiative and learning, again, it's taking initiative, but an angle of it, learning the big picture of why, does your work even matter? Like how does this connect to everything? Because the more you learn about how the piece, you're doing, how it connects to the bigger picture, the easier it is to say, okay, I can actually think of a better way of doing that. And then it also requires, you to take the initiative to learn. So it's all about learning and initiative.
Well, yeah, I mean, and it is it's an execution, really, right? And it's being able to just do something, right? And then articulate that. Your verbal and written communication skills are very, very, very important.
Absolutely.
But you mentioned several different roles that you had, of course, that these individual aspirers can look to. I mean, audit and compliance. These are areas of focus that are cybersecurity driven. Now, everybody doesn't have to be a pen tester. Everybody doesn't have to be, in the SOC. Everybody doesn't. I mean, there are roles that are very, very, very important. And there are ways, like you said, avenues by which to get in a particular role where you continuously learning something different that you can now transfer into a cybersecurity related role. I have a question. As it relates to your own personal journey, what is the most useful tool in your arsenal when you're, being ambitious as you are and trying to climb the corporate ladder?
Oh, okay. So I would say it's that related to taking initiative, but I'll call it maybe acting as if. So if there's a role or a position, something I'm trying to be, to put myself in that headspace and act, like it. And I'll give you an example. So back to, when I started off as an auditor and the opportunity came up on the team, and I remember the manager said then that, well, we're going to need somebody to be the liaison to the information security departments. And I wanted that, and almost everybody else wanted that, but I was the most junior, right? So I wasn't really expecting to be competitive, to compete with anybody on that. But I wanted it. So I started thinking like how I would think like if I were the information security then liaison, what would I be doing? okay, I will be checking out what projects, they're doing, making an assessment of which ones, should we be engaging on. So I started doing this and I would walk into my manager's office. He hadn't made this decision yet, but and I wasn't expecting to get it. But I would walk into his office and say, hey, you know what? I see that, they're doing this project over there. These are some things we should be thinking about, when we engage with them on that project. And in order to even, tell him that, I would go read, I was, following blogs, security blogs. If they were doing a project, I was looking, for papers and people who were writing about that and educating myself on all those things. So when it was time for him to make the decision, I remember I was at a team meeting and everybody was, like arguing and saying, why they should be. And I was just sitting there quietly. But then he said, oh, you know what? I think Omi is the best for this role. So I would say, and that was when I realized that, oh,
Was it a shock silence? Was it a shock silence when he
it
said
was,
that?
it was a great team. I got along with everybody. Well, it was I guess they could see it too. And they didn't argue with it. So I was like, oh, okay, Omi. I was like, okay.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And then again, what that is and what Omi is talking about is making yourself a value to the team, right? And going above and beyond just by again educating yourself on the different things. You show that you actually care about the organization when you're being insightful. And I 100% agree with you. I would have those. You always. I've always thought that I dress for the next role, right? And I mean, I've been in organizations where my boss is walking around in jeans and a polo or whatever, and I remember someone gave me the feedback at one of the organizations. They said, "I've never seen you in pants." I was like, "Cause it's hot." Oh, first of all, it's hot outside. But secondly, I was like, I never really thought about that. But I was always dressing for the role and putting myself in the position to be thought of as that next step in my career. And those that were, I had my own goals. I had my own mission that I was going for. And so I agree with you 100% that you start to think like that role before you get there, because that's what is going to allow you to verbalize and articulate in a team environment, and they can actually think of you as someone in that role, right?
Right, and it's dual because it's not just about other people thinking about you as is. I think it affects you as well. When you're thinking of yourself as that next role, then you start doing things, that actually propel you towards that role. So
Yeah, you speak it into existence. I'm good for that, right? Yeah, yeah. But all right, so we only have what about? See, I told you it was going to go fast. We only have like 10 minutes left. If anybody has any questions, please put it in the chat. Or I did see something in the Q&A. Wait a minute before I ask my last question. There is a question. You mentioned that you should consider an interim role as you look for your dream job. How would you navigate the interview process while being honest about your career goals? I worry about burning bridges and tarnishing my brand while trying to build it.
oh, well, I think one should be honest, during interviews, but then you only need to share the information that you want to share, right? So say your target role is, say you want to work as a, in GLC, something, but an opportunity, but you're not even in IT at all, you are not even in the field, but you find an opportunity maybe to work in, I don't know, so communications like cybersecurity awareness. It's okay to say, hey, you know what, maybe this is you don't have to go and tell them, hey, this is just stepping stone to something else I want to do. But look at the value that has for you in that moment. Like, oh, this is a desire, like this is a desirable role in the moment. And interview and kind of speak, from that framework. You don't have to say, oh, I'm going to do this for, 2 weeks or 2 months and then leave. Because you never know. Maybe you will end up liking it. Maybe it will end up translating into something bigger.
No, and honestly, it's the same thing I talk to when I talk to the apprentices about how do you describe what you're doing right now. It's a journey, especially if you're a younger professional, transitioning professional. You got a certain amount of years, and there is not a lack of skills not that you can't learn in order to incorporate that into your next role. So yes, I agree with Omi. You don't have to come out and say this is a stepping stone, but you can say I am gathering different skills so I can be a more well-rounded information security professional, and this is one of those areas that I'm focusing in on. And so that's how you get across. I mean, your brand is your brand. You're not tarnishing your brand by being honest. But what you need to do is be creative about the other transferable skills that you can gather in the interim while you look for another, cybersecurity related role.
Right, right. And when you're interviewing for the job, you're going to be more about what are the transferable skills that you bring to that role? How can you be of value in that role? So, I think those are the things that you want to focus on in order to get the role. You don't need to be talking about, okay, maybe what else you want to do or what you would like to do, but you don't have the opportunity to do now.
Well, I mean, honestly though, there's a story, and we, you talk about where you are on your journey. It's a journey. No professional is interviewing for a role thinking this is the last role I'm ever going to have. That just doesn't happen. And so being honest with yourself and being honest with the people that you're talking to about your journey. Everybody understands the word journey. Everybody understands career journey. And as you now gather additional skills so you can be a better professional, nobody's going to knock you for that. So I don't think it's a situation where it's a knock on your brand. It's just, there are certain times, especially when you are in cultures. I started minorities in cybersecurity because I needed a distraction from the bad culture that I was in. Okay. When I started minorities in cybersecurity. So you need something else to get your mind to where you're taking some level of control back to for yourself, right? And you're working something productively. And so those things, they it happens, right? We go through this stuff. So I'm one to be transparent and honest. It goes to authenticity. That comes across. That's what people say. Oh, you're so authentic. I'm just me, right? And I'm gonna speak and tell you who I am. And I again, I'm one for speaking my dreams into existence anyway. But I know we only have 5 minutes, 6 minutes. I want to get to this last question though, and to put you on the spot. So what's next in your career?
Oh,
You're ambitious. Yeah, yeah. Come on, what's next?
You know what? People say that, and I don't feel it. I feel like I'm not ambitious enough, and that's something I'm really deeply reflecting
That's
on.
that Nigerian in you. I'm sorry.
Seriously. But something I've been very focused on or hyper focused on this year really is enabling, my team, like really would like to get to the point where I can say I have a self-directed team and starting to see some of the, seeds of that where I'm not, the one like just building the ideas of, okay, now, let's do this, let's do that. And all the people on the team are coming up with the ideas of what to execute. So, and also taking a closer look, introspection on my leadership and what I can be doing, better to enable that, right? At the conference, I think was Joe Sullivan talked about storytelling, so communications and that being one of like the key responsibilities, for us in cybersecurity. So how do I drive greater influence? How do I cast a bigger vision? How do I get buy-in across the organization, in a broader sense. So, working to do better on that. And while I'm doing that, being open to possibilities.
Hey, okay. I see the PC way you answered that question. All right. And I'm going to let you have it. I'm not going to go any further into any details. Last questions, anyone? Anyway, we got 4 minutes to go. No? Okay. Well, Omi, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate um you coming on. Uh-oh, wait a minute. We got a question. Somebody got in under the wire. See, was that is that a trick? Is to close out early and then we could get people to ask questions? Is that the trick? I think we talked about that this week. Let's see. Allowed to talk. Hello, Joyce.
Oh, mine is not really a question, rather than a compliment and appreciation for you sharing your story. That really inspires people like us who are trying to get into the field and sometimes feeling very discouraged and not knowing, are we heading the right direction? Are we saying the right things, but in interviews, and kind of have a similar background with you with the tech field, being in a help desk position. And I still know I appreciate the skills gained from that I can apply towards my career in cybersecurity. That's all.
Absolutely.
Appreciating your input.
All right.
Well,
Thank you.
thank you. Thank you. We did have another question pop up in the Q&A. Anything you would change in your journey?
Uh, Looking back over the long term, like based on where I am now, I would say no. At different points in time, there were the little bits of, oh, maybe, I should not have made this move. Uh, so a couple of things. I said earlier, that I took information security of my resume. I added it back when I started applying for the IT audit job because at that point I was like, oh yeah, this is valuable. This is super valuable.
Right.
So maybe one thing is maybe I should never have taken it off, right? And that was kind of allowing myself to get discouraged. So it's really stay the course and don't get discouraged. The other thing is being more cognizant of organizational culture. All right. So, it's one of those things where you might not really appreciate it until you're in a place where okay, you're not quite feeling it. Because early in my career, my first few roles, I had worked with not just great organizations. It's usually down to your manager and your team, right? How you feel. And I had, great managers. I was very, very lucky in that. And I, still do have great managers. But along the way, it took me a while, before I understood that, hey, you know what? Sometimes it's not me because I was coming from a place of I am in control of everything that happens to me. I control. I said earlier, that I can only control myself. I can't control other people's behaviors. I manage my manager, all of that stuff. But then I learned that, oh, gee, all the while I was saying that, I was lucky that I had great managers. Right. So just being
Yes.
cognizant of that so that, it faster to spot it and maybe not even end up in that situation.
Yeah. No, well, we all if we all experience challenges in life, period, whether that be personal or career. That's how we grow. And so, like I said, thank you so much. We are at time, and if you know anything about me, I'm a stickler for that. So I'm going to close out. Thank you so much, Omi, for joining us on the mic this evening. I told you it was going to go by fast. So thanks
Again,
again. Thanks to everybody that's out there. Thanks everybody out there that joined us. And for those that have not liked and subscribed to our YouTube channel and you're watching this, just go ahead and click that button for me. I mean, we need that. So do that for me, and we'll go from there. But thank you again, and thank you everyone. We'll talk again in a couple weeks.